these childhood heroes that we had grow up and they're being laced in with these messages that are supporting all these fucking things, right? Like prime
Yep.
example, the latest fucking Thor movie. Have you seen that garbage yet?
I haven't watched it because I saw a trailer, and just based off a trailer, I was like, I'm not watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, so
That was
aside
enough for me.
from being a very disappointing movie, like there's several openly gay characters in the fucking movie. Like I don't ever remember picking up a fucking comic book when I was a kid
Never.
and reading about a gay or otherwise superhero. Superheroes were just doing superhero shit.
Yeah.
That's all we
I,
needed, right? So now we start to see all these things, and dad's parents are not, they don't have the fucking balls to be like, no, we're not watching that. You know, like I'll watch the other Thor movies with my kid because there's none of that in there.
yeah.
But they know, like if you were to go in there and ask my kids right now, like, hey, can you watch the latest Thor movie? They'd be like, nope.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Purpose Over Pleasure. And today, I have a pleasure of talking to Mr. Stu Blackwell. How you doing, brother?
Good to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for finding the time, man. I know we have a busy schedule. Mr. Blackwell, right here, right? He just released a new book. He's the author of the book Savages. Look forward to reading it. And he's also a founder and a host of the Warrior Legacy podcast. Thank you for
Indeed, it's
joining
been
me
a
today,
wild
brother.
ride, man. Yep.
I can't wait to hear about it, man. So, you want to give a public a little rundown, introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
talk about the flag.
yeah, the flag. So that's
How,
a unit insignia, actually for Second Battalion, Sixth Marines, the first unit that I was in the Marine Corps, the one I deployed to Afghanistan with and saw my combat action with. Good buddy of mine that fought in that battle with us. He drew that up himself and got it to all of us. So it was pretty rad, man. Um, but yeah, so before you know the before the podcast and before the book and all of that, I grew up in Germantown, Tennessee. Graduated from high school here in 2007. Nothing too remarkable in those years. I was your typical wild child, hard headed, rebellious kid. You know, gave my parents hell, especially when they were trying to, teach me things that I was definitely going to need later on in life. But as it turns out, my chosen career path right out of the gate was going to reveal those things very quickly and very forcefully. Um, I enlisted in 2007, same year that I graduated high school. I didn't even spend a full summer at home before I left. I was on the Yellow Footprints at Paris Island in July. So yeah, July 1st. That's where I was. And, right off the bat, I wasn't a stud or anything like that, but, I noticed that I wasn't having as much emotional difficulty with some of the things that were going on as some of the other guys, and
you were or you were not?
I was not. No,
You were not.
no. And the first letter that I wrote home, much to, as much as it must have hurt mom, my first letter home was to my dad, to say, hey, thank you for actually, quote unquote, being hard on me and
Yeah.
actually holding me to a standard. Um, and there's something to be said that, for dads that can do that and actually take the time and dedication to actually pour into their kids. It makes a
Yeah.
huge impact. And it definitely did on me.
So your dad was around growing up, right?
Oh yeah, yep, he
That's
was.
good.
He was a air traffic controller, so he worked some crazy shifts and stuff like that. But if he wasn't, he was usually doing one of three things the entire time that we were growing up. He was either at work, and we lived very comfortably, or he was working on the house. That was like that's what he wanted to do with his free time,
Yeah.
or he was doing something with all of us. He was at a football game, he was at a band recital for my sister, he was at one of my wrestling matches, something. Like we were his entire world, and that example really has stuck with me. That's the benchmark. Um, so I was very fortunate to have the parents that I had. he and my mother have been married since 1982. So a long time, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
almost coming up on 40 years soon, huh?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's impressive, you know, especially in today's day and age. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, sad as that is, but it's true, you know. Um, and yeah, you know, my older brother was in the Marine Corps as well, so that was a big influence on me. And you know, when I signed up, I went active duty. I knew what I was getting into. The war in Afghanistan was kind of starting to ramp up a little bit. Iraq was kind of on the downturn. The Battle of Ramadi had just been fought, I want to say, around that time. Um, and so I requested an infantry contract, and you know, he was there. My dad was there through the entire process, and you know, the recruiters couldn't really pull one over on me, which was good. There's a lot of dudes that they got told one thing, and then you know, life turned out to be completely different for them once they showed up.
Is that
Um,
common?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Recruiters are fucking satanic, man. Absolutely. They will lie, cheat, steal, do whatever they have to do to get that number, man. Like
Is
we
that is
had.
that why is that why Marines are still hiring? I was checking the numbers for the hiring rates, and Air Force, Army, Navy, it's all like down the last couple of years, but Marines are still steady. Like recruitment rates are steady, dude.
Yeah.
Is that why?
Uh, to some degree, yes. That's definitely got to have something to do with it. I think that also a lot of that has to do with the way that the services are presented and the way that they're perceived by the public. Um,
Hmm.
and if you look specifically from about 2010 to about 2015, we had that giant sweep of changes across the board. You know, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, you know, so
Yeah.
homosexuals could openly serve. And then
Yeah.
sexual assault prevention became a huge deal as well.
Yeah.
You had like entire infantry training battalions, like 1,000 to 1,300 men, that instead of being out in the field and training for war, they're stuck in a fucking gymnasium somewhere listening to Death by PowerPoint about how to not touch somebody inappropriately. You know, great use of taxpayers' dollars, right? And it's not that it's not
And
important, but I
yeah.
mean, holy shit. Like, really? Really? Like, there's a much better way to go about that, I
Yeah.
thought, you know? And then hazing was a big thing as well. Like, some of the traditions and stuff like that, like when you get promoted and things like that, that we saw as like vital to our culture, that we respected and esteemed. They were seen as like sacrilege all of a sudden, you know. And then women were allowed into combat arms MOSs, you know, and that's
Yeah.
what, like when you look at any one of these things, it's like okay, whatever. But when you look at them as a whole, that sends a completely different message. And conveniently, everything came full circle and they pushed all these things through right before an election year. Like,
Wow.
come on, man. Like,
Yeah.
we're not that fucking stupid. We know what you're doing, you know?
Yeah.
So that's why a lot of guys didn't stick around. And I think that the way that the Marine Corps was actually like, actually, you can tell us what to do. Yes, got it. But here, why don't we test this out first? Or why don't we get some feedback from some people first and see how this is going to go over and actually think about how we're going to implement all these things? Most of the other services just grab their fucking ankles and we're like, yep, great. You know? And then you turn on a recruiting commercial, you know, and you know they advocate for all those things, for all those lifestyle changes and stuff, and it sends that message that the organization as a whole values that as opposed to constitutional defense, which is what we're meant for.
Yeah.
You know, that's going to turn off a lot of your recruiting base, especially
Yeah.
if they had family members prior to, you know. So, and I think that the Marine Corps did a much better job than all of the other services when it came to that. Still didn't get the result that we wanted, but we at least tried not to say uncle.
That's crazy, man.
Politics,
I think
man.
it's like that across the border. And I was checking some numbers the other day,
Yeah.
especially during those years that you were talking about, when they allowed
Mm-hmm.
women and all that. And I was checking the stats because they say the don't ask, don't tell, and the sexual harassment and all that came about because you have higher numbers of sexual assaults
Hmm.
in the military. But then right before that is when they let women in to serve. So obviously, when you put a woman amongst a whole bunch of men, at high testosterone, obviously, it's only natural that that's going to happen. Not to say it's normal, by no means it's normal, but if you're going to let more women in, you're going to have higher numbers of sexual assaults. Doesn't matter
Right.
if it's military or prison or anywhere in the streets. So it's kind of, let's do this. Oh, well, now we have high number of sexual assaults. Let's now bring all this and all these changes into play. Well, you guys kind of created that, sort of. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And, there was plenty of common sense arguments against it while it was going on, so nobody can really say, like, the people that made this decision can't really say, oh, well, we didn't know. Like, no, you knew. Like, you fucking knew. You were told. You just chose to ignore, plain and simple,
Yeah.
because you had bigger political aims in mind. And that was the whole point, you know? I mean, there's a reason why we haven't integrated, you know, or we don't have like women playing in the NFL, right? And there's a
Oh,
reason
Jesus, man.
why Olympic wrestling has men's and women's divisions,
Yeah.
right? There's a reason
Yeah.
why Dana White hasn't let a dude and a chick fight each other in the octagon. Like,
Oh, dude,
it's
that
just the
would
way
be the
that it
fastest
is. And
fight ever.
there are some stud chicks out there. Like, I guarantee you, we could go around and look and find some places where some chicks can probably do some more pull-ups than I can. Great, that's
Yeah.
awesome. There's a very big difference between the number of pull-ups that you can do and the 3 mile run that you can do, and can you beat somebody to death with your bare fucking hands if you need to?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, the numbers don't. There's outliers everywhere, but
oh yeah,
generally speaking, across the border, it's just not going to happen.
yep.
What are your thoughts about the fact that we have? I was checking the numbers recently, and we talked about that earlier. Like all the military branches, besides the Marines, they're struggling with recruitment right now. Not only that, according to recent surveys, this younger generation, only 9% of them feel somewhat patriotic enough to join the military. So everything is on decline. What are your thoughts about that? What did we do something wrong? Is it the politics? Is it the new generation? What's a contributing factor to the fact that our military is on a downfall right now?
So, um, there's a lot to unpack there. The politics, yes, I think that's where it all goes back to. And I've been doing a lot of reading lately with my son. He really wants to learn about like the Holocaust right now, and World War II and everything. And yeah, we talk about the battles and that kind of stuff, everything that every boy wants to learn about, right? But when
Yeah.
we read about the Holocaust, um, I started him way back in the 1920s. Uh, Almost 2 decades before the war kicked off, because I wanted him to understand what happens in a society and how things can get to that point. And the one thing that I found in common when I was doing my research before he and I started talking was Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. The one thing that they all had in common was they all went after the children. They all went after schools. They all went after what the kids were being told, how
Mm-hmm.
they were to
Mm-hmm.
act, and that was a huge, like, it just jumped out at me, and I look and I'm kind of like, huh, where have I seen that before? Wait a second, we want to tell kids that it's okay that they can choose their gender and that what their parents
Uh
tell
huh.
them isn't okay, and say, hey, no, don't go outside and play. Sit here and face fuck this screen all day and let us do your fucking
Yep.
thinking for you, right? Well, I remember when the internet came out, and honestly, like, I think we're still a little bit. It's strange to say because that was back in the 90s, but it's
Mm-hmm.
still too soon to observe fully what the effects of that are on a generation. We'll know soon, we really will, but I definitely think that has something to do with it, and I do think that it's intentional. And I think
Yeah.
because of that, now we're starting to see kids are not really pursuing those kinds of adventures anymore, or if they
Yeah.
are, it's for different reasons. The fact that we're not at war, quote unquote, technically, or at least on a large scale anymore, that has something to do with it as well. Um,
Yeah.
there's a certain type of person that's built for a peacetime military. I was reading Ulysses S. Grant's memoir just to, you know, see his perspective on the Civil War. I've studied virtually nothing on that war at all, but one thing that he said, jumped out at me. He said that there was two types of men that go to war. Or that serve in the military. There's one that would not be fit for any other form of employment at all, and then the other signs up solely to go to war as a matter of principle. And when it's over, it's over.
Huh.
They're done. They want to go do something else.
Okay.
And a lot of guys that signed up around the same time that I did, that's why we signed up. I mean, the haircuts and the boot bands and, the shiny uniforms and stuff, like, yeah, all that stuff's great. And you can definitely be good at those things. But we really wanted that adventure, that you weren't going to find that anywhere else. And that's like, it doesn't happen but once in a lifetime for most people, and so we don't have that anymore. And it's not, I don't think it's going to pull that specific demographic right now, so
That's kind of sad. I mean, how bad do the times have to get for people to become patriotic again, to go into the military or to seek action? Like, what has to happen?
Well, patriotic sentiment is definitely part of it, man. But I don't think that it necessarily has to be tied to that. It's the adventure, the development, and other than normal life. Okay, that in itself can bring another group of people to the table. But even if you don't have a war, you can still find a way to market that. For some reason, like I'm just not seeing a whole lot of that. Now I'm not as plugged in as I used to be, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't know why that's not what they're going after. It just
Yeah. Now you go to the military, right? You said 2006, 2007, right? You go to
yeah.
military. You were there until for almost a decade, and multiple tours, right, to Afghanistan, or where'd you get deployed?
So I deployed like 6 times in total. Only one of those was a combat deployment to Afghanistan, though.
Uh huh.
Now I didn't change occupational specialties. I was an infantryman my entire time in. But I did a couple of Marine Expeditionary units. It's essentially you're a quick reaction force for a certain part of the world. You're on a naval vessel. You pull into a couple of ports. You get drunk, essentially. See some cool foreign shit, and maybe do some training in some foreign countries, and that's kind of it, And that was my first deployment. Actually, I was kind of pissed about it at the time. I wanted to go to Iraq. Looking back on it, though, it was good that we didn't. We got that time to learn from our seniors that had just come back from Fallujah, to prepare for our next deployment, which was to Afghanistan, which was to Marshall. And So that was my second one. And then after that, I did a little stint down in Guantanamo Bay. I will never go back to Cuba. It's a terrible place. Dreams die there. It's awful.
Really?
Yeah,
Why is
absolutely terrible. It's just, and part of that was just the setup. We had a really like oppressive, I guess you could say, command. And that's coming from, at that point I had already completed my first 4-year enlistment, right? So I had seen a few commands,
Oh,
but this one was just fucking god awful, man. They would bust people down for any possible thing that they could find, and they were looking for it too. They enjoyed it. The commanding officer there, actually, he had a mason jar on his desk of chevrons that he would take from Marines when he demoted them, and he'd keep it there as trophies. And he kept it right there on his desk so everybody could see it when they walked in. So like, and he would take his wife and kids actually up to the towers where our Marines stood post, and he'd find something wrong and he'd just chew them out, just life them out in front of 2 little kids and his wife, and then they would go back down and they'd drink beer and they'd fish at the base of the tower while that Marine's sitting up there in 90-degree heat, rotting. Pretty messed up, right? So
wow.
that's the kind of shit that makes Marines want to leave, want to get out. you know.
Lack of leadership.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Do as I say,
Yeah.
not as I do. Rules for thee and not for me.
Yeah.
I go into a lot more detail in the book about that and the effect that that actually had on some of the guys that were in our platoon at the time. And that was a unique duty station. It was called Third Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team, which is it's made into this like high speed, low drag type thing, and it's not like at all. Um, it was more akin to like a Roman legion, a whole lot of manual labor, um, with a little bit of tactical expertise kind of sprinkled in. But yeah, got done with that, went over to Bahrain for a bit, and Bahrain was our jump off point. So again, kind of like similar to the MEU, where we were a quick reaction force. Bahrain was like, okay, if a U.S. embassy or a diplomatic outpost needs help, or they get overrun, or something crazy pops off, they request Marines. You guys are going. And when the Benghazi incident kicked off, 2012, I want to say, yeah,
I think so.
2012. Yeah. Okay. So when that kicked off, while that was going on, um, a massive riot over in Yemen in Sana'a, in the capital. They stormed the embassy over there as well. So we got spun up and flew into Yemen, um, to make sure that that was all secure and everything. There was no combat, or anything like that. There's a lot of observation. They were like they watched us the entire time that we were there, and they were waiting for us to shoot somebody or do something stupid that they could videotape and put on YouTube. And
Back
um,
then?
oh yeah, that's a
Huh.
yeah. They because here's the thing, man. This is why it sucks fighting a war with one hand tied behind your back, or when one side thinks that doing what's nice, is more important than doing what is effective. Um,
Yeah. Oh
the
yeah.
enemy knows what you can and can't do. They know.
Yeah.
They know. Hell, they know better than entry level Marines do what you can and can't do. And I'm sure you've seen some similar things as well in your line of work, right?
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So
There's
they
a
will
saying that
use
I
that to their
that
advantage,
oh yeah, there's a saying that I always tell people, and you can relate to that. I'm not the angel you want. I'm a monster you need.
right?
When I want you to be an angel, because of the perception, that's when things go downhill.
Mm-hmm.
We have a full capability of being the monster, and even personally, look around you right now. We've become so weak under this current administration that we have the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm not even talking about Yemen right now. God knows what's happening there today, and
Yeah.
just we lost the grip. We lost the grip and the control that we had over all these countries, and the power that we established for decades. And everybody's just doing whatever they want to do. It's like every child is doing whatever when the dad is now not at home, sort of thing. You got sons.
Right. Right. Well, the scary part is, and when politicians and people, especially in the kind of corrupt climate that we currently have, regardless of the administration, I think when they can't project their power abroad, they have to project it somewhere. So if it's not going to be abroad, it's going to come to us one way or another.
Yeah.
I think they're being a lot more smart about it than Hitler or Stalin or Mao were. Um, and they're being patient with it, which is ironic because they expected all these changes to happen in Afghanistan, like seemingly overnight, um, which was never realistic. Cultural change takes decades, half a century, maybe even longer, depending on what culture you're talking about. But with us, man, they've been laying the groundwork for 10, 20 years or so, and they're not in a rush to get anything done. I don't think
Yeah.
they're taking their time with it. So it'll be interesting to see how the next 2 or 3 decades play out.
I would say we were already in that stage. I'm just like yourself. I'm curious about studying war and war history.
Mm-hmm.
I've always studied a lot of greatest world's greatest generals, and overall, I'm a big fan of history. So what I have learned is that, first of all, the systematic implementation of what's happening to children and younger generations right now started a long time ago. It's actually a tactics that was created by the KGB Okay, all you need to do is you need to take one generation and fully cycle that generation through the propaganda and everything that they're pushing into children right now in schools. And after you have that one generation that's been fully from birth to adulthood brainwashed, you can pretty much turn them into anything. It's beyond point of return. So obviously the Soviet Union collapsed, KGB collapsed, but countries like China took the same theory, they took the pages from the same book, and they've been implementing it. That's why it's different from Afghanistan. It's a whole different culture, and Afghanistan is known for a very, very tribal type of community.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't have to tell you because you served there, but I also am very familiar with Afghan culture. Like they're different. It's whatever the tribal chief says. Like they'll welcome you to their house, and they'll feed you, and they'll give you the last piece of bread, right? But if their tribal chief says slice his throat, they'll come back and slice your throat the same night.
Yeah.
It's a different culture. Not good, not bad, not worse. Different culture. That's what people have a hard time understanding. That's why we have a hard time understanding going into Middle East for decades and like, God damn, how come we just can't conquer these people? Alexander the Great tried, bro. Multiple powerful empires tried and they still failed. Who are we to not learn those lessons from history and try to go in and change something? Besides the point of politics.
No, I mean, and it's funny that you say that. And, I talk with my kids about this. We actually named our oldest after Alexander. And he was the only one that had any measure of success in Afghanistan. I mean, he made it out.
Mm-hmm.
We'll say that. As far as conquering, that's debatable. But he was the most successful. And it's the thing is, man, is the world has yet to produce a man of his caliber again. And I don't think that it ever will. Unless things get really, really bad. So if you dig into his past and where he came from, you start to understand why he was the way that he was and why he was capable of doing what he did. You understand his father as well. I'm at this phase now where, I've read a lot about specifically the great three of ancient military history. So Alexander the Great, Hannibal Barca, and Julius Caesar. And now I kind of want to know more about their families. I'm a dad, so if I want my kids to be awesome, to be great, or at least capable of achieving great things, maybe I should see how these guys were raised, right? What I found is Alexander's dad was a scumbag. He was an incredible tactician. He was an incredible war leader. But as a man, fuck no. Absolutely not. It's a perfect example of what not to be.
Well, his mother raised him.
Yeah.
She was a conniving. I don't want to use the word. She was a pretty evil person too.
Right.
That whole family was pretty toxic, man. Maybe that's why he drank himself to death at a young age. I mean, God knows what this kid saw growing up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jesus Christ, man! Like his dad had like 8 wives,
Yeah.
and he would alternate between beating the shit out of them or just treating them like garbage, and that was one of the reasons why Alexander hated him so much. He felt more kinship with his mom. But from that hardship, which he didn't deserve, no kid deserves that at all. He grew into the man that would achieve something great. And despite the fact that our divorce rate is so high in this country, despite the fact that most fathers are not where they need to be, the whole view of fatherhood in this country that's come under attack recently is sad. But even despite all that, we still don't have a man of his caliber, and I don't know if we ever will. Yeah, today, that could change in the future. I hope that it does.
Yeah.
I really do, because I think it would take someone of that caliber to solve some of these problems that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Have you ever read Hard Times Create Strong Men?
I have not. Actually.
It's a great book by Stefan Arnio. May he rest in peace. Guy was young when he wrote it, so it's called Hard Times Create Strong Men. But the concept is hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times again. And I'm a strong believer that that is true, because if you let's look at the post World War II era, right? Yep. Let's go back to Depression. Screw it. Let's go back to Depression, World War One, World War Two, baby boomers. I mean, go to war. Countries in ruins, right? Everything is pretty much. Well, we're the only country out there who actually sort of benefited from World War Two. I'm not gonna lie. Let's at least own up to it, you know. But again, our veterans came back, rebuild this country, right? Build great economy, skyscrapers, cities, married, build homes, raise families.
Hmm.
And then you have slowly the next generation and the next generation and the next generation that became weaker and weaker and weaker. And nowadays, look at what we're dealing with. We're dealing with all this propaganda, all this brainwashing of our kids with sexuality in schools. I mean, as a dad, I'm sure that's a concern to you. I'm not a father yet, but that's already a concern to me.
Yeah.
Um, and just these weak men are now creating hard times, and they're not hard yet. And my biggest fear was what I tell a lot of young guys, like, wake up right now before it's too late. Because once it's too late, it's going to be really bad.
Yep.
And I'm not worried about myself. I've the way I was raised, the knowledge that I have, the experience that I have. Like, I can go out there, hunt, kill, do what I got to do. So are you.
Right.
But the majority of these men, there's a reason why a lot of those guys, join the programs like the Gogi that
Yep.
we're in, because they need to come back to our roots. And men, we're wired to do hard shit, borderline
Yep.
violent shit. That's in our DNA.
Yep.
So you can run from it, you can hide from it, but the reason why you're so fucking depressed and miserable and angry is because you're not doing the stuff you're supposed to do as a man. Like joining the military, do something hard, challenge yourself.
Right. Right. And it, the concept is what's really important there. Like, what works for me is not going to work for somebody else. And the same goes vice versa too. Like, I don't like, people don't have to join the military in order to get that, and I think that's a very important thing too. Like, you can go find that for yourself. You really can. It's amazing what happens when you just turn off all the tech, leave your fucking cell phone inside, and just go outside. Like, just go outside. You will, I promise you, even as a grown man, you will find a way to keep yourself occupied. It's just, it's just something that's inside of us, man. I just started reading Wild at Heart, actually.
Wow, that hard.
Yeah, just started reading that. I'm about like 3 or 4 chapters in right now, and he's been talking about having the battle to fight and the adventure to be had and the beauty to chase and everything. And man, like, we're really big boys. We all still want
Yeah,
those same things. We
yeah,
want to go do hard things. We want adventure. We want to go outside. We want to explore and push ourselves and find out what we're capable of. And we want
yeah,
that beauty to save at the end. You know, like,
yeah,
there's never a day that goes by when I'm not thinking about my wife, when I'm not with her. I have only seen her like 2 or 3 hours ago, and I'm probably going to see her again on the back end 2 or 3 hours later. She's still on
yeah,
my fucking mind, man. Like,
yeah,
it's not a complicated equation, you know. But the cumulative effects of everything that we're talking about has gotten us to this point, and it's going to have to get bad enough to where people say they finally had enough. And how bad that
yeah.
is, nobody can really predict. Um, I
Well, last time I got bad enough was 1776, brother. And that's
Yeah.
what men were like, we've had enough.
Mm,
And what came out of that is this great country.
it's true.
Well,
Yes.
yeah.
Different set of
But then how,
circumstances. I hope.
yeah,
Um, you know, it's the little bit that I've read about the Civil War is shown me that that's a no win scenario. I think, but I definitely, a lot of people that I think clamor for anything armed and violent are 9 times out of 10 the people that are not going to be actually doing armed violent things when it comes down to it. You know,
hmm
most
well,
people that I think would be willing to do that are not going to be the people that are going to be super vocal about it. This is another thing that Grant mentioned, in his memoir. He was talking about all the politicians and even the young guys, the young dudes that were just up and coming on the scene and everything that were all clamoring for war down in the South, they
Yeah.
weren't the ones that were, bleeding out at Gettysburg or, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Politicians play games, but
yeah, they
real
do.
soldiers are the ones who lose their lives. What are
Yeah.
your main concerns for your children as a father? How many kids you got?
So
Boys and
I've got two right now. Alexander just, see, he will be 10 in a few months. Odin just turned 7. And we just found out that number 3 will be here in June
oh,
sometime.
congratulations, brother.
So thank you. Thank you. The tribe's growing.
Alec,
So
yeah,
if it's another boy, I'll
Al,
have a full fire team.
yeah,
Yes.
Alexander. As an Alexander, I appreciate you naming him Alexander. And then the second one, Odin. I can see why you name him Odin. I love it. You gotta give
Right.
that energy from the beginning.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
man,
Well,
what are your concerns for your sons, if you have any, as a father?
so, um, God, man, that's a that's a loaded question. Um, the thing is, man, and this is something it's become much more evident to me recently, right? That the world that my parents prepared me for, and they did a great job doing that, but the world that they prepared me for and that my wife's parents prepared her for, that no longer exists. We have to deal with certain things that they just didn't have to deal with. It's no fault of their own, but I mean, think about something as simple as the internet, right? Like kids are starting to learn about things a whole lot earlier than we did, right?
Oh yeah,
The way they talk, the amount of time that they dedicate to that instead of other productive pursuits, sex, okay, and not just pertaining to gender, like the actual physical act thereof.
yeah,
All these things are happening much sooner, so I still go to my parents frequently and I ask them for advice. Um, but there's some things, a lot of things that we're just going to have to kind of figure out as we go and try our best to plan for in advance. And there's never a point where I feel like 100% in control. And that's kind of scary, when you think about your kids and all the things that could happen. I think the medicine for that is, being in groups like the Agogi and stuff like that, where you're around other like-minded people. I don't have friends here. Like I just don't, like I haven't been able to find anybody that wants to live a similar lifestyle and that has the same core values that I have and stuff like that, you know? Um, but basic like social interaction. Like I think that my kids will suffer because of that. I grew up in a very religious home. It wasn't
yeah,
archaic or anything, but we were always at church with other families that were at church. It was a community within our
yeah,
community. You know,
yeah,
my kids really don't have that. Outside of like sports and athletics and stuff, and both of them are involved in that. But that's one thing. Limiting the outside influences is monumental, and there's only so much that we can do with that. Like we can't hide them from things forever.
yeah,
My parents couldn't even do that, and nowadays those things are happening a whole lot sooner. So I have to be a whole lot more proactive as far as the things that not just I shield them from, but also the things that I expose them to. You know, I didn't see my first R-rated movie until I was 13 years old. That was it was Gladiator. And I remember that, it was around the time like Gladiator came out, then The Patriot came out, and then Saving Private Ryan was there as well. Like those are the first three R-rated
yeah,
movies that I saw.
the original
But
Gladiator.
no, not, not the original. No, 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 no. But and my parents, they crow when I tell them some of the things that I've let my kids see. I watched 13 Hours with Alexander the other day. He's not even 10 yet.
Oh,
It was
yeah,
heavy for him, but
yeah,
he's going to go somewhere and he's going to hear something about that incident. if he hears it from me first and he gets educated by me first, not just on
Yeah.
what happened and not just, hey, we're going to watch this for entertainment purposes, but I'm going to explain to you what's going on here because I want you to understand. All right.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand what's right, what's wrong. Okay. Especially if you choose this life later on down the
Yeah.
road, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that if we're going to be proactive, then that has to happen a lot sooner, you know? Questionable movie choices aside, I think that, you know, the concept is sound. But yeah, that's another thing too. So limiting those outside influences, and schools are not, you know, I live in Mississippi, so a lot of that stuff that's going on other places, like we don't have those issues where we're at right now. I'm very thankful for that. I really am.
Yeah.
But there's going to come a point in time when that's not going to be the case, you know? And I don't think that can be stopped. I just think it's a matter of time before that agenda becomes pushed into every single aspect and every part of our country, you know, whether we want to or not.
Ooh, I live in California. I'll tell you right now, man. There's a lot of cities here, especially in Southern California. There's a handful of counties who are like to the point where there's now parents standing up and fighting for their children's rights and for what's given and pumped into them by the school system.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if you follow. There's a city in California called Glendale, and there's a whole page dedicated to Glendale GUSD, Glendale Unified School District. Oh man, they're fighting hard because they start to discover that their children in middle schools and even elementary schools, they're assigned books about sexuality, homosexuality, performing oral sex, and these parents had just had enough. So they're standing up to these city officials, to the school districts. Yeah, there was even a like not a riot, but it was like a protest going on one time where parents were literally like standing up to Antifa, and it got out of hand, where the parents like, literally like fought the Antifa
Yeah.
for that.
No, that's good, man. Like that's what it's gonna take, you know. And I don't think that our politicians have advanced to the point now to where they're not really. I don't think they're really gonna give ground. You know, they've got no problem just like hanging out and waiting for another decade or two until the generation and the people that they have brainwashed just kind of move up down the line, and then they're the one making the decisions. You know, they're playing the long game, you know, and it's very
Correct.
shrewd. I've got to hand it to them. But it's one of those things that like I don't think people can look at it and be like, oh, hey, we did that. That's great. We won this one. Now it's over. Like, no, this is something that's going to have to happen consistently for years and years to come until one side quits. It is a cultural war. That's how I see it, you know?
I think it's up to us, man. The reason, and you know, I don't know if you were on that call last week with Nick when Nick talked about not backing down and you know bending over for the politicians and the system. And I'm in the same shoes. The whole reason behind my podcast, I'm trying to bring back masculinity. God damn it! Like I'm trying to bring back and educate men because the divorce rates are not playing in our favor.
Yeah.
The whole social media OnlyFans not playing in our favor. Everything out there is basically eradicating masculinity, and the reason why the society is so weak nowadays, and it goes, you know, in all the aspects of society, whether it's the economy, whether it's the educational system, whether it's the family, everything comes down to one simple thing: fathers and masculinity. You take away a father, you preset the child for failure in life. They even go beyond that. Let's refer to it as the devil, for example, because the devil has to get to the woman if he wants to corrupt the child. Let's look at the Bible, man. The Satan didn't go to Adam. He went to Eve. He was like, all right, here's the apple. Take a bite. It will be a lot better. And Adam told her, don't touch the apple. Because the God told Adam not to touch the apple. But the devil went to the woman. So if the devil wants to corrupt the man, he needs to go to the woman first. Because women are emotional. they're easier to succumb to their emotions. And you take away the father, and now you have these boys who are raised by women. Hence, you have 20+%, homosexuality rates in this country, obesity, you have suicide rates, drug abuse. It's crazy.
Yep. Yep. It's a good point to bring up, man. And correct me if I'm wrong here. And this is actually the book that I'm reading right now, Wild at Heart. He talks about this as well. This specific scenario. And I was raised in, this Christian home and stuff. I'm very familiar with the story, but he pointed out, he was like, yes, so Satan went to Eve first, okay? And he tempted her, okay? She passed that on to Adam, but Adam did nothing. He may have said something, but he did nothing to prevent it. And so we see that in action, the way that most people are living nowadays. And I was like this for the longest time after I got out too, before I joined the Agoni. It was one of the things that was literally destroying me as a man. And I saw the effect in my children too. The lack of will to actually just say fucking no. Like to say no. Like we're not going to do that. Or no, we need to be doing this, Another thing that we haven't hit on yet is cinema, right? I did a podcast episode about this not too long ago, but we're starting to see all these childhood heroes that we had grow up, and they're being laced in with these messages that are supporting all these fucking things, right? Like, prime example, the latest fucking Thor movie. Have you seen that garbage yet?
I haven't watched it because I saw a trailer, and just based off a trailer, I was like, I'm not watching it.
Yeah, so
that was enough for me.
From being a very disappointing movie, like, there's several openly gay characters in the fucking movie. Like, I don't ever remember picking up a fucking comic book when I was a kid.
Never.
And reading about a gay or otherwise superhero. Superheroes were just doing superhero shit.
Yeah.
That's all we needed. Right? So now we start to see all these things, and parents they don't have the fucking balls to be like, no, we're not watching that. Like, I'll watch the other Thor movies with my kid because there's none of that in there. But they know, like, if you were to go in there and ask my kids right now, like, hey, can you watch the latest Thor movie? They'd be like, nope, absolutely not. And they know why too. I had to explain to my kids what that was at a much younger age than I was ready to fucking do. I don't need that shit pushed on my fucking children, and I shouldn't have to worry about it going to that type of movie. I shouldn't. But it's like they are dead set on brainwashing this generation, And that's the thing where what we were hitting on earlier in Nazi Germany, and especially in like Russia, it got really bad in China under Mao's rule and stuff. It got to the point to where it was some startling statistics, like 1 in 5 family members was a spy for the government. Like, kids would go to school and turn their fucking parents in because they said something against the state the night before at the dinner table. Is that the kind of shit we want going on? Because that's where it's fucking headed if it doesn't get checked. Like,
let me tell you something, brother. In California, there's a bill that they're trying to push through. I forgot the name of the bill. I can send it to you later. It basically, there's multiple bills. Number one is I think they're trying to drop down the age of consent for children to change their gender to, like, I don't know, like to 10 or 9, something like that. Another bill is where, yes, if as a parent you don't consent and agree with your child who wants to change their gender, it's actually going to be against the law, and you can go to jail for that. And number 3, another one. This is where I'm getting with. This is ridiculous. A child can go and tell the counselor at school that the parent is not allowing him or her or whatever they identify as to change their gender, so that the state can take the child away and place him somewhere in a state-owned facilities. Essentially, is what you're telling me about. A child will go and snitch on the parents, and the state will take custody of a child. Believe that. Riddle me that, bro.
That's how it starts, man. It's the same thing that you see with the the fucking red flag laws, right? Where, like, somebody can just call in and be like, hey, this person's unfit to carry a weapon too. Like, Really? Really? You're gonna listen
it's
to, a pissed off girlfriend or an ex-wife or something like that, or even an
yeah,
ex-husband? You know,
yeah,
like it doesn't really matter the gender at that point. Like some people are just fucking vindictive and they try and get everything that they can from people that they hate or people that
yeah,
they love, and they have a really shitty way of showing it.
yeah,
Um, wow, I didn't
yeah.
realize that was starting that soon, but that's
It's wild.
yeah,
It's wild, bro. I'm telling you, there's certain things that living here in California that I realize it's like, are you serious? And for me, as a person who knows history, I'm not saying I'm a historian and I know all
right.
the history, okay? But I'm very familiar with history and I enjoy reading history.
Mm-hmm.
I see patterns. Tell me you don't see patterns.
Oh yeah,
You start to notice
absolutely.
patterns, okay? And you're like, okay, this is happening right now. What's happening right now has happened back then. And this was a result of that. This was the goal, and this was a result. And now we're seeing the same shit happening here. So people like
Right.
myself and you were like, no, something needs to be done, and something needs to be said about that.
Yeah.
Because if we sit quiet, we'll just basically we're gonna hand over our children and our future to them. And it's funny you mentioned the movies. The
Yeah.
last movie that I went to watch in theater, and I'm a big fan of Marvel and superheroes, big
Yeah.
fan. The last movie I went to see was the Doctor Strange,
Okay.
the one where one there was a girl, America Sanchez. Remember when he's
I don't
running after
remember.
this girl? It was the last. It's the last one that I watched with Doctor Strange, where he's in multiple
Okay.
universes, and so this girl, right? And check this. Watch the movie. Her name is America Sanchez. Okay, so first name America, but she's a minority. She has two mothers, so her parents are lesbian. She's wearing a denim jacket with the flag on it and also LGBT insignia. Okay?
Yeah.
And dude, as I'm sitting and I'm watching this movie and I keep like getting irritated. And my girl was like, babe, it's just a movie. I'm like, you don't understand. You don't understand. This is not just a movie. Like I can see through the bullshit. If before these subtle signs were tiny and barely noticeable, now it's like obvious. It's like LGBT, communism, brainwash, sexuality. You don't need a father. You don't need a man. And the same thing someone told me about the Ant Man and the recent Ant Man. Again, I didn't watch it because my friend said, dude, it's basically a daughter making fun and making her dad look stupid the entire movie, and like sabotages him. Again, didn't watch that. And I don't remember these characters. Marvel or this new movie that's coming out with three female superheroes. Like who? I
Oh.
never. I don't. Who the hell are they? Like what comic book did they come from?
Yeah. Yeah. Man, like I'm all about like honestly, I don't care if it's a chick or a dude. Like I really don't, you know. But don't shove that shit in our fucking faces, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing, it goes back to the inaction. Most parents don't have the fucking balls to tell their kids like, nope, I'm sorry, I know you really want to see that movie, but we're not going to go and give our money to that. I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
but they messed it up. This is why they messed it up. And if I let you
Mm-hmm.
do this, okay, then later on in life, when it causes a fucking problem for you, it will be on me. And I'm not going to do that to you because I
Yeah.
actually give a shit about you. I care about how you turn out, you know? Because most dads, frankly speaking, are doing the same fucking thing, man. They're on this all day, and some people have to do it for their job. I got it. And some people can actually be productive when they do it. I spend a lot more time
Yeah.
on it than I want to, but I guarantee
Yeah.
you I'm prepping my fucking macros or doing something like that. 9 times out
Yeah.
of 10, you know,
Yeah.
instead of we've gotten to the point to where we're allowing those types of influences to do collectively, to do our thinking for us instead of using it for the tool that it is. Like
Yeah.
we have the greatest tool in all of human civilization to advance knowledge, and we use it for OnlyFans.
Oh God.
Shit,
Yeah. It
right?
that's what we have become. That's what we have allowed ourselves to become.
Yeah.
And
Now
that's
you
the sad
see,
part.
here's the thing though. I've got a startling suspicion, okay, because our generation, like there's still a large percentage of our generation that's caught in that fucking cycle. And I was caught in that cycle too when I first got out. I screen sucked all fucking day. I played fucking video games. I watched movies. I stayed up late at night because I hated my job and I hated what my life had become and the fact that I wasn't on active duty anymore, which, by the way, I chose. I asked to get out, right?
Yeah.
I was so miserable with that I used that as an escape, all right? But that was only going to last for so long, and I'll never forget the moment when it actually happened. I was working I was working in a local restaurant chain here after I got done contracting. I was trying to move up in that and get my own shop and all that and everything. But I was working like 65 to 72-ish hours a week or so. I was fucking miserable, man. Absolutely miserable. Wasn't making nearly as much money as I was contracting, that's for sure. I was getting fat again. I was out of shape. Wasn't working out. Wasn't sleeping well. Wasn't developing. Wasn't reading. Okay. And I was going to pick my kids up from school one day. One of the rare days where I got off early enough to do that. And we came in. Beautiful day outside. Beautiful fucking day, man. Sun was shining. Wasn't quite fall yet. And we walk in the door and both of them flock straight to their iPads. Like straight to their iPads. And I'm to the point now to where I'm so fucking miserable with my life and I literally avoid looking at myself in the fucking mirror. Okay? And I just took a second and I looked outside and I was like, wait a second. Like, this isn't right. Like, we should be out there doing cool shit together. And that led to me calling Nick. Yeah. I couldn't fucking stomach it anymore. When we see that effect, when you see it in your fucking children, and it actually hits you of what life's gonna be like for them 10 years later, 15 years later, when you get that fucking phone call after they're gone and out on their own, and you're not there to teach them anymore, and they're like, Dad, this terrible fucking thing happened. Why did you not prepare me for this? Why? The fuck are you going to say then? Because it's too fucking late at that point. Hopefully it's not something too bad to where they never want to fucking speak to you again. Right?
Yeah.
So that was the flash that I fucking had. That was my kick in the nuts. The lightning bolt that woke me the fuck up. And it's kind of funny too. Like, and about 3 or 4 months in to, this journey, I'm in the Agoge and, it wasn't that difficult for me to flip the switch. Like I had made that decision beforehand, and when I called Nick, I had already decided that I was willing to do whatever the fuck I had to do. I had already made that decision. So when I had the conversation with him and he told me what was expected, okay. And so I ran the play and I kept fucking running. I put that shit on fucking repeat. And it took a while. It took about 6 or 8 months or so for my kids to see, well, dad's different. Now it's just, this is dad.
Yeah.
It takes a while. It does. But when we get to that point to where we're that fucking miserable, there's going to be a decent proportion of men that I think are actually going to have the fucking balls to do something about it. There'll be some that won't, but there's bound to be more, man. There really is. And especially with the hard times that you're talking about that are coming. Yeah. Like, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when, and it's going to be sneaky. It really is. There's going to be a whole lot of shit gets really fucking hard, and then people ask that question of how the fuck did we get to this point, man? And then it's all going to come crashing down, I think. Wow, maybe if I had been a little bit more plugged in instead of staring at my phone all day, maybe I would have seen this coming. Or maybe instead of letting my kids do X or Y, if I had done A or B, things would have been different,
My fear is that when the times will become hard, that we won't have enough men to stand up, because the majority of them will be brainwashed That's my fear, legitimately. Because good men will always rise up against the tyranny.
Oh yeah.
It's always happened in history,
Hmm.
but it's that much harder. And you can see it through the history of Soviet Union. You can see it through the history of China.
Yeah.
It's that much harder and takes that much longer if you have an entire generation or a society full of weak and brainwashed men.
Yeah.
You know, this country was built based on the fact that, we deserve freedom and men need to be free.
Hmm.
And when you slowly chip away at that, chip away at that, chip away at that, and people willing to give up their freedom for safety, like, get the fuck out of here with your safety. Like, I want my freedom. Whatever happens is my choice. If I decide to take a shot or not, if I die or not, whatever. But it's my decision. I'm not gonna blame
Right.
somebody for that. But my freedom is a God-given right, just
Hmm.
like you serve for us to be free, and I serve for people to be free. Like we both protect
Yeah.
the Constitution. But at the end of the day, it's up to us, the men who live here, the everyday men, for us to also protect the Constitution and the freedom of this country.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I
it starts
think.
in the home, man. It really does
Yeah,
start in the home. You know. Yep. But
yeah,
it's
I think so.
I think that the manner in which that is done has a whole lot to do with the outcome as well, which sounds stupid to say, but if you really think about it, the first thing that people think when we talk about, rising up or, standing up to the man or whatever tag you want to put on it, however you want to call it, or revolution or whatever,
Yeah,
it's the manner in which people go about that says a whole lot, not just about them individually, but it says a lot about the collective attitude. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. The people, our politicians that want to advance and essentially exert complete control over free will, which is really what they're after, and it's really what people are surrendering by living the way they want them to. They're surrendering their free will. Okay. Um, I don't think that that's going to be solved through an armed conflict. I really don't. I think that it has to be done first and foremost in the home. One of the
yeah,
things that we read about, with my son the other day was how families would gather around the radio in Germany and they would hear Hitler and his speeches. Like they did it as a family. It was a family activity. So we got
yeah.
everybody all at once. And then you factor in the schools, and then you factor in the cinema. He had complete control over that as well, like the entertainment industry. Um,
Propaganda.
yeah, it really is, like Nick says, it is asymmetrical warfare. That's what it is. And an armed conflict, an armed revolution, an actual rebellion, that just gives them exactly what they want. That gives them the excuse that they need to exert more control. Well, I mean, look at what happened. The gun control argument's the easiest one to think of. Well, look at all the shootings. We need to take guns
Hmm.
away. Like, no, motherfucker, that's not how it works. You know,
Yeah,
um, but it's got to be done with an end state in mind. And this is one thing that I picked up. I read a book years ago, actually. My wife sent me a book when I was in Bahrain before, the whole Yemen debacle. And
yeah,
it was called
yeah,
Masters of Command and the Genius of Leadership by Barry Strauss. And he talks about how each of the three commanders, Alexander, Hannibal, and Caesar, they all went to war with an end state in mind. They knew what they wanted the post war world to look like. And then I think about Afghanistan and I think about the war that I fought in, and I'm like, where the fuck was that for us? Like, did anybody think about that at all? Did anybody have any fucking clue what they wanted things to look like at the end? Did we even know that we were going to have an end? I don't think so. I really don't. So rushing into those things without having first decided this is what it needs to look like. These are our specific goals, our specific fucking aims, and these are the steps that we're gonna take to get there. That's
yeah,
the way to go about it. And it has to start in the home. It has to start with men actually being men. And part of that is just rediscovering what the fuck we were meant for, man. We were meant to do hard shit. part of us was meant to be violent, to actually be violent and to be capable of violence. And I
Yeah.
say this to my kids all the time. I want you to have a healthy relationship with violence. And sometimes there's some parents, like if we're at a taekwondo tournament or, you know, Odin's Ninja Warrior or soccer tournament or something like that, like sometimes parents will overhear that and they'll give me this look like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, are you a monster? Like, how dare you tell your kid that?
Oh, Jesus
Like,
Christ.
um, I just kind of fucking laugh. I don't really pay any attention to them at all. Like, they know that their friends aren't being told that, but that's not like I can't do that for their friends. My
Yeah.
responsibility is them. But if
Yeah.
each parent takes ownership in that manner, even if it's different than what I'm preaching, okay, at least it's the parent exercising their free will and showing their kids that's what this looks like to use this, you know, that's where it has to start, man. You
100%.
look at there's some great organizations out there like the Apogee
Squire
program.
program.
Well, the
Apogee,
Squire
Squire.
program
Yeah.
too, yeah. But the Apogee program, where kids can actually go
Yeah.
get, you know, really, really good schooling and what I think
Yeah.
an actual education because they do shit in the fucking real world. Another thing that I tell my kids all the time, like, you get school from school. Your education happens here with me and mom
Yeah.
and out in the world. Like they know that's where their learning takes place. And when we read, it's not the typical stuff that they're going to learn about in school, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah,
That
it's
makes
got to
sense.
start in the home.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you. Talk to me about your book, man. I know you got a book came out yesterday, right? Yesterday, today,
Yeah.
yesterday. Yeah, your
Yesterday.
book came out yesterday. Yeah, talk to me about your book. What prompted you to write your book, and what is your book about? Like, what's the end goal? Because I'm sure you didn't just write a memoir for nothing, right?
No. And I hate using that word memoir. I get like, you've got to classify it as something. I understand that
Yeah,
in the literary world. Okay. And especially since I'm a newcomer, I get it. But, so what I've done here is, and I've done a lot of reading from some really, really great fucking authors that have written phenomenal books. And what I noticed though, when I got out, was I came back home and I still had that bad taste in my mouth from all those changes that we were talking about a little bit earlier, from 2010 to 2015 with Don't Ask, Don't
yeah,
Tell and, opening the specialties to women and sexual assault and hazing and all that kind of shit, right? I was one of the dudes that was like, you know what? I could stay in here, I could retire, but I I don't want to be a part of this. Like I really don't. I have no desire to destroy the culture that we built over the last damn near 2 decades of war.
yeah,
Um, and so I got out and I was bitter and I was angry about it, and that led to, you know, drinking and the depression and all of those things, right? And so my wife was just like, "Hey, why don't you just write it down?" So I started writing it down, right? And then as I interacted with civilians, I jumped right into the corporate world, by the way, with HR and everything that goes with it. And so, needless to say, it was a bit of a shock to me. And
yeah,
what I noticed when I kept reading, and I wanted to know why, like why did this happen? Why things gotten to the point that they have. So I started really digging in, and what I noticed was there was that pervasive view of the cookie cutter service member mentality. If you wear a uniform, people say thank you for your service. And if you went to Afghanistan, then clearly you went over there to fight, right? Well, everybody that wears a uniform is not exactly the same, right? I'm sure that you've seen some police officers in your time that are probably really overweight and shouldn't carry a firearm, right?
mm-hmm.
I've seen the same thing from people that are in uniform, you know? Um, and so that was the first thing. I was like, wait a second, no. Like, this is all wrong, right? Like, not everybody that went over there actually fought. Not everybody that wears a uniform is actually meant to fight or even trained to fight. They're trained to qualify on an annual rifle range. That's a far cry from actually being able to locate, close with, and destroy the enemy. Very big difference. But that's not common knowledge, you know? So that was the first thing. I was like, all right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to fucking do it right. Okay. And so I took my time with it and I wrote everything down from the start of my fucking career all the way till the fucking end. And then as I went back through and I redrafted and I crafted it, I started to realize, like, because I was reading at the same time as well, there's nobody that's actually came out and identified what that root cause was and what makes things, different groups within the military, different. It's like this, all right? So picture yourself standing on like a 4 or 5 story building in like some busy city, like New York or some shit, right? It's raining outside and everything. The only thing that you can see when you look out is a sea of umbrellas, and they're all going about their business and stuff like that, right? Would it be right to assume that every single person on the street is a businessman? No, it wouldn't, right? But we see it, we're like, oh, yep, that's New York. They must be all the same. They all work on Wall Street. No, that's not the case, right? You go downstairs and you look around, you see people doing all kinds of shit, right?
Yeah.
It's the same concept, man. Like there's a lot of different occupational specialties, and nobody that I have read anyway actually comes straight out and says, this is what makes the small part of our armed forces that is actually meant for frontline combat different than everybody else. So I highlighted 6 values that I believe form the basis for the infantry's culture, not the Marine Corps', not the services, just the infantry, And I can't do that for any other occupational specialty because I was an infantryman. I don't have their experience. I have mine, And I saw how that affected how we interacted with people outside of the infantry. POGs is the term that we use, persons other than grunt. But yeah, discipline, toughness, selflessness, lethality, proficiency, example. Those are the infantry values that I was introduced to after I left recruit training. The second that I showed up to SOI, we were separated from everybody else. Everybody else, regardless of what job they were doing, they went somewhere else. They went to Marine combat training, and it was like 21 days long, and then they went off to their LS schools where they could learn what they were actually going to do.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that separation. All right. So we go there, we do our school, and then I went to my first unit, and it was much of the same thing. The tactics changed, the way we were treated changed, what was expected of us, that expectation went through the fucking roof. Okay, because at that point, like, guess what? The real thing's right around the corner, bub. You better pick it up. You better learn fucking quick. But those values, that's what separated the infantry from my experience, from everyone else. And that's the difference. What I did in the book is I highlighted those values through my personal experience. Okay. And I gave specific examples of each and the emotional development that took place in me personally, so I didn't pull any punches in, when I was talking about anything at all. And there's a lot of things that are going to kind of rub some people the wrong way, but it's written from that perspective of this is how I felt about this at the time. Like losing a comrade. My squad leader was killed in Afghanistan, and that was that's not meant to garner any form of sympathy or anything. We all knew it could happen. It's not like it was a fucking secret that we were at war or where we were going, But he was killed on the advance party. So the small group that goes ahead to kind of pave the way for the rest of us. And none of us were ready for that. Like you always picture yourself, like every man's going to wonder what it's like before he goes. And he's always going to wonder what it's going to be like to, to be shot or blown up or to see one of his buddies get killed or something like that, But none of us prepared for hearing that one of our squad leaders, one of our key leaders, was killed before the rest of us even got in the fucking fight. I was 21 years old at the fucking time. I had been a team leader, so only in charge of about 3 cats for the last 9-10 months, something like that. And Now I had to fill his shoes. I had never been to war before, man. My first deployment was in MEU, like, so I go into a lot of detail about what the fuck was going on inside me, how I dealt with that. I also had a young wife at the time. Me and Jen had just gotten married. Um, I think 6 months before, maybe, you know? So she's hearing about all that. I'm about to fucking leave. Um, and yeah, that set things up for a lot of very hard lessons to be learned, a lot of them. And that kind of that played a very pivotal role in who I developed into as a leader later on down the line. So beyond that, it was how I took those lessons and how I endeavored to be better. You know,
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes, and I was able to use those, and I think enrich the experience for future Marines that I would have. And the last and final point is, we talk about technology and its proper use and everything. Like, we have tools at our disposal nowadays that no other generation before us has had. You know, we have, I believe, a responsibility to tell our stories. Okay. It should be us that decide what our legacy is going to be. Each generation has their legacy that they leave. And if we just don't do anything about it, if we don't open our mouths, if we don't write books, if we don't engage with people, if we don't show them the value that this can bring to just being an American, then we have nobody to blame but ourselves if none of the problems get fixed. Or if we go into another war 10 or 20 years from now and the same shit happens. Like, I got sons, man. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, but deciding what I believe our legacy should be. That's the final point.
Yeah, and the last one is kind of touch close, man. Like I said, I got sons.
Yeah.
As a father, you trying to prevent your sons from not only doing the same mistakes that you've done, but you're also trying to prevent them from having to go and do the same thing and have somebody else decide their fate for them.
Yeah.
I feel you, bro.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy. Where can I love it. I gotta get my hands on that on that book, man. Where can people find you? Where can people find your book, and where can they find you? Because I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there. I mean, I come across a lot of veterans who have a really hard time adjusting, especially after they leave and they're trying to assimilate into the real world. And some of them have PTSD and all that stuff. And a lot of them have depression, and they deal. I'm not gonna lie, VA is not the best tool, brother.
No,
So
fuck
where
no.
can they find you? Where can they find your book and anything out there about you?
So the book is available through Tactical 16. That's my publisher. So you can go to their website at tactical16.com, and I'll send you a link as well for this, brother. But that's where they can find the book. So right now we're in a pre-sale period. So for a limited time, you can actually get a signed copy by me. It'll come to me first. I'll sign it personally, and then get it shipped right out to your house. I've also got a little bit of swag and some things that I'm throwing in there just to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. But tactical16.com, that's where you find the book. Warrior Legacy Podcast, you can follow that on Instagram, and that's available on Apple, Spotify, and Anchor as of right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sweet. And to close, I will always close out my episode with this question. It's a kind of a loaded question, but it's a two-part question. The question is this: what is the true purpose of life, and how can a man or woman, or how can a person find their purpose in life?
Ooh. So the true purpose of life, yeah. Yeah, you weren't kidding, man.
Told you.
Fuck, that's a tough one, dude. I believe that is living life to its absolute fullest. Okay. Now, in order to do that, I think that we have to be in touch with who we are on the inside and what we were actually meant for. Okay. life's going to get hard one way or another. It's just a question of which hard do you want. Do you want somebody else dictating what's hard to you? Or do you want to get out there on your fucking own, find the adventure that you want to live, and you choose the fucking hard? You choose it. Because if you choose it, there's purpose in that, and there's fulfillment in that. And if you have that, then that spreads to everyone around you. It's fucking contagious. And it can't be stopped. No government can take that away from you. Okay? Your family members can't take that away from you. It's yours, but you have to claim it. You have to make life give it to you. So that's what I would say. It's about leaving that for the next generation to go and find. We're promised life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit. We're not guaranteed success. We're not guaranteed happiness. We are guaranteed the pursuit. But you have to get off your ass and get out there and fucking find it. That's what I would say.
And is that how a person can find purpose? Is getting off your ass and finding it?
Yeah, and that's a whole lot of. There's a whole lot of critical questions that have to be fucking asked there. All right, on that journey, like it's essentially getting to know yourself. You know, at least that's what it's been like for me, man. And I'm nowhere near done with that journey. You know, it's climbing the mountain that has no summit. It'll stop when I'm dead, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Whether that's tomorrow or 40 years from now, you know?
Yeah.
That's the way that it's going to go down for me. I've at least found that part. Now, the twists and turns along the way, I can't tell you how those are going to play out. Yeah. But if I'm always searching for that, if I'm always pursuing that, okay, and I'm always adhering to that little fucking voice, that same voice that I had when I was a kid that just says, just get out there, see what you're fucking made of. If you fail, you fucking fail, but at least you did something. At least you went for it. At least you went all in. That's it. That's a life well lived, man. It is.
I love it, man. I fucking love it. That was awesome. I think you said it perfect. I cannot agree more, man. You said it perfect. That's, you know, we're not guaranteed success. And we're not guaranteed happiness. But the point is in a journey. It's in a pursuit of what you really want to do with your life. You hit the nail on the head, man. I love it. I love it. Well, listen, man, that's been a great conversation. I appreciate you finding the time. I know we got time difference. And, yeah, thanks for finding the time. Thanks for sharing your story with me. And, your take on everything that I ask you and closing it off strong, man. I love it. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me, man. This has been rad, dude. We gotta do it again sometime. When I get things transformed on my end, I'll have you on Warrior Legacy, and we'll get into you and what you got going on, man. You're killing it, bro.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And for all you listeners, if you guys found value in this, again, all me and my friend Stu are trying to do is basically share our experience, our wisdom, and everything we've learned with you guys. So if you find any value in what we've shared today, mostly Stu, who honored us with his wisdom today, click like, subscribe, and share it. Share it with those who you know who might need to hear this, especially with some veterans. Definitely send them the link and spread the word. That's all we ask. Just be part of our journey. Thank you everyone for watching. Stu, appreciate you, brother, and I'll see you guys next time.